If I had to give 2 tips to fast track arm growth, 1, I would say have good genetics. 2, take steroids. That would be the fastest way. So these next few tips are going to be really helpful. What we'll do, we'll go through a brief overview of some what I think are quite obvious things, and then we'll get into finer details later on. We'll start off with something that definitely gets neglected, and that's just the progressive overload element of training your arms. I feel like a lot of people train their arm movements like an accessory at the end of their push or pull workouts or upper workouts, whatever it may be, and the intensity just drops off and their arms are already fatigued and they're not getting nowhere near as much out of them. So they end up just kind of going into the sets, pump and fluffing, just chasing a pump, and never actually ever get stronger with their, their bicep curls with dumbbells, for example. If you are still curling 10 kilo dumbbells and you were 3 years ago, no wonder, people's arms aren't growing. So the goal with training your arms shouldn't solely be chasing a pump, which leads me on to this next tip, which is not using too many intensifiers. So I see a lot of people when they're training their arms, they'll be doing drop sets every set, supersets, rest pause sets, you name it, just to kind of get more of a pump. And whilst that may work, it also may not. So again, just linking back kind of to the first point, you just got to make sure you're getting stronger. I feel like it's a good idea to use intensifiers, for example, a drop set, but maybe like the last set of that exercise. In terms of rep ranges, obviously from anywhere between 1 and 35 reps will build muscle. However, I don't think it's wise to be doing 2 or 3 reps with a bicep curl. So for me, I typically spend most of my time between like 8 and 15 reps with my arm training. Occasionally I might do like a 6 to 8 repper if it's potentially like a compound movement for my triceps. I don't really go below 8 reps of biceps. Not saying that 6 reps are bad, just for my own personal experience, I feel like I get more out of the targeted muscles when I stick to a slightly higher rep range, just because I feel like it's easy for other muscle groups to take over. For example, with bicep curls, it's really easy if the elbows kind of flex out really far in front, so the front delt does a lot of the work, hyperextending, the lower back getting involved. For the triceps, let's say you're doing a tricep push down and you're upright at the start of the set. As the set gets more difficult, you end up flaring your elbows, leaning over, chest takes over. Low reps work. However, you've got to accrue enough volume and you've got to make sure you're still on the targeted muscle. So me personally, I'd recommend between 8 and 20 reps. I feel like a lot of people, when they go to the higher end of the rep range as well, like 20 plus, a lot of people just can't tolerate the discomfort from the high rep sets. Although you could argue biceps do have slightly more fast twitch muscle fibers, so a lower rep range may yield potentially a little bit faster or better results, but I feel like you're splitting hairs at that point, and I feel like as long as you're getting stronger in whichever rep range you choose, you're going to be sound. In terms of rest periods, like any other muscle group, I always advise kind of go into that next set when you feel ready. So if you feel like you can match the set previous or get as close to as possible, that's when you should go in. So with bigger kind of compound movements, let's say you're doing a tricep dip, I'd probably rest more towards 3 to 5 minutes. If I was doing a cable curl, then potentially I'd rest 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Obviously, this all depends on how much time you've got available to train, but the more demanding the movement, potentially the more rest. The less demanding, then less rest. When it comes to training frequency, this is one I've actually experimented a fair bit with over the years. I've never gone below 2 times per week frequency. I have experimented up to 4 and 5 times per week frequency. Obviously, reducing the amount of sets I do per session on the higher frequency approach. But to be honest, I've never really seen a difference in results when I've split my sets up into more days. I think potentially I may have seen a little bit more growth when I've done more sets throughout the week, which kind of makes sense. But I know the one time that I did notice a fair amount of progress in my arms. This was kind of early on in my training as well, so maybe it's not too, not relevant's the word, I don't know what the word is. What's the word? Anyway, I noticed a fair amount of progress in my arms, and that's purely just because I got stronger, which links me back to my first point. Last two before we get into more finer details. Gaining body weight is going to be essential for most people. If you're a skinny guy and you weigh 130 pounds and you got 12-inch arms, you're not going to get 16-inch arms if you're the same body weight. You're going to have to grow everywhere, get stronger with all your compound movements, get stronger with your isolations with your arms as well, gain body weight, eat in a calorie surplus, and that's the only way you will grow your arms. Obviously, if you're somebody that's got a fair amount of body fat and you can recomp or do a fat loss phase first, then do that. And of course, alongside a sufficient amount of calories, you need enough protein to stimulate muscle growth. That's why Protein World has sent me out some whey protein. You can use my code PWBRAD and that'll get you 40% off. When it comes to what equipment to use when training biceps and triceps, obviously we've got cables, free weights and machines. I personally prefer free weights and cables just because of the ease of, accessibility. And with machines, I'm sure there's some pretty decent ones with maybe favourable resistance profiles, but I feel like a lot of them can be a bit awkward, a bit restrictive. I personally just like to be able to grab, an easy bar and a cable, align, my joints where I want them to be, and yeah, it's just easy as well. Now, so let's talk in a practical sense in terms of what exercises to do. Let's start with the biceps. Obviously, you've got the short head, the long head, the brachialis. Who's ringing me? It's my brother. He can wait. Sorry, young. So in terms of the three main functions of the biceps, we have elbow flexion. So flexing the elbow. We've also got shoulder flexion when the arm comes in front like this. Primarily, that is the front delt's job, but the bicep helps out. And the third one, we have supination of the forearm. So this. So we need to think about doing these movements when we're training our biceps. To target the short head, what I would advise is a preacher curl with the arm out in front. That is going to really target the short head well. To target the long head of the bicep, what I'd advise is either like a Bayesian curl with some cables or an incline dumbbell curl. And for the brachialis, what I'd advise is just doing some hammer curls. Those three exercises alone will be all you need to grow your biceps. For the triceps, there is obviously three heads. We've got the lateral head, medial head, and the long head. Two main functions. So we've got extension of the elbow, doing this, and also shoulder extension, which is when your arm is behind your body. Three movements I'd recommend. I'd recommend a compound movement to target the medial and lateral head. So I'd go with a tricep dip or a close grip bench press. And for more work on the medial and lateral head, I would do a tricep pushdown. And to target the long head of the triceps, we need something where our arm is behind our body. So we could either do a pushdown where our elbows come the whole way back, or we could do an overhead extension like with the cables, or we could do a dumbbell skull crusher. They're all the movements you would need to grow your triceps. Two other things to quickly cover. Exercise sequence. If I was training my biceps and I was doing two movements, I'd do the preacher curl first, working the shorten range, and then working the lengthen range with a Bayesian curl afterwards. And then same with the triceps, I'd work the shorten range first with a push down, and then spend more time in the stretch working the long head of the triceps with an overhead extension. That's exercise sequence. In terms of form execution, you'll notice with the B-roll clips I probably put up on this video, everything is very controlled. Still trying to get stronger. It doesn't mean I'm training like half-hearted, but I'm making sure the tension is on the right muscle. Sounds obvious, but people don't do it. A lot of people end up looking like they're doing a backflip when they're doing a cable curl. Don't do that. Last thing to cover, do you need an arm day in your training program? I personally think for beginners, you don't need to, because if your bicep is just in a close proximity to a dumbbell, it'll probably grow. For intermediates and advanced lifters, I'd say it would be wise to go through a block of periodization to, improve your arms via an arm day. Because training them fresh in comparison to at the end of a workout is night and day, and I feel like you'll get a lot more out of your arms. That's just my opinion. Just try it out, see how you go. But yeah, I think that is me pretty much done, I think. So hopefully this video was useful. Please drop it a like if it was. Subscribe to the channel, please. If you need any further help, just drop me a DM on Instagram. You could apply for online coaching in the description of this video. But yeah, I'll go. See you later.